Welcome to Gene Decode. This decode will be available first on deep dives. It'll also be made free to the world, parts 1 and 2 of this decode. It's expanding Earth, and then part 1. Part 2 is hollow Earth. Part 3 and beyond will be on deep dives. Part 3 will go into the details of hollow Earth, starting with Admiral Byrd at his diaries and participation in running Operation High Jump. So that being said, this is part 1, the expanding Earth. It'll be available through the surface area that'll connect through Blessed for Service website, blessedforservice.org, and be on other platforms as well, available to the world. Thank you so much. And without further ado, welcome to the nature of planets and the expanding and hollow Earth. The growth and expanding Earth, expansion tectonics. The current accepted theory is known as the random continental drift theory. Basics on this for those that don't understand it. The continents move in a random motion on a globe which has had the same mass, and that's the key point here, throughout its history. Currently, this is accepted and taught as fact throughout schools in all countries. This theory on Earth's continental positions and geological history originated from observing the obvious fit of the American continent with Europe and Africa. Expanding Earth, basic introduction on this theory is that the pioneers of the continental drift theory believed in continental expansion originally, where continents all fit together, the American continent to Europe and Africa, as aforementioned, but also Asia, Antarctica, and Australia to the west coast of the Americas. Part of their analysis also had this fit on a smaller globe where Earth was 52% of its current size. At that size, continental fit is 99% complete. The expansion of Earth's size would change the shape of the continents. So as continents, the Earth got bigger, you'd see an orange peel effect work. And this computer modeling of compensating for the change yields a 99% fit. And this will be gone into more, is actually part of the proof of the expansion of the Earth. Earth expansion continental drift theory pioneers. First was Robert Mantovani, published a theory, expansion, Earth expansion and continental drift. It was in 1889 and 1909. Mantovani believed a closed continent once covered a smaller Earth's surface, entire surface. Lindemann in 1927, Christopher Otto, Hilgenberg in 1930s, and pivotal to this entire dissertation are two people highlighted here. The first is Professor Sam Warren Carey, who was Emeritus Professor of Geology at the University of Tasmania, 1950s to 1990s. And then also pivotal to this document, Decode, is Dr. James Maxlow, Curtin University, Sydney, Australia, 1990 to the present. Also, additionally, on this theory, way of viewing the continental movement is also Jan Kosier in the 1980s and Klaus Vogel, 1980s to 1990s. Continental expansion theory was discarded for two reasons. The continental fit is not readily apparent due to the Pacific Ocean's vast size. You look at a globe and the Pacific Ocean is mostly what you see if that's where you're centered, like the Hawaiian Islands or something. No mechanism that allowed for Earth's growth. The Wagner bombshell of gross continental separation promptly triggered the concept of Earth expansion as an alternative to drift. But books in German by Lindemann in 1927, Vogelpow in 1930, and Hilgenberg in 1933, and Kindle in 1940 got little attention in the English literature. A second wave by Agate in 1956 and Carey like I mentioned previously, primary to this Decode. 1958, Keeson in 1959, Barnett in 1960, Brodsky in 1962 as well as Neiman, and then in 1965, Creer and Dernley. In 1966, Jordan, 1967, Steiner, and Mazurbe, as aforementioned, 1969, ran against the orthodox tide, which in pretty much any science, but in geology, it's lethal to the theory being put forth, and often the career of the person or persons. And a lot of professors have lost tenure and been dismissed and all kinds of things. The discovery that pan-global oceanic rifts have paleomagnetic growth zones. In other words, magma that was laid down and condensed during the paleo times, along with confirmation of that by JOIDES, which is JOIDES, Joint Oceanographic Institutions for Deep Earth Sampling. You can see the link there, that all oceans are post-Paleozoic, fit equally displacement or expansion models. The plate model combines ocean floor growth with axioms that orogenesis, which means mountain growth, implies crustal shortening, and that trenches are actually underthrust, and that the radius of the Earth is constant. And all three of those axioms are invalid, and I'll go into that during this decode, and it'll become quite evident why. The plate theory has fatal errors. Primarily, the biggest one is that Africa and Antarctica are ringed by expanding rifts. Each should have post-Paleozoic subduction zones to swallow more than 3,000 kilometers of crust, but they do not exist whatsoever. You're missing quite a bit of that. You have nowhere near that. This dilemma could be sidestepped by fixing one continent to the mantle below. But you can't do that with two continents and have it expanding. It's impossible with two such continents. The Permian equator now lies 37 degrees north of the equator in North America, but 40 degrees north in Europe, and only 17 degrees north in Siberia, as you see in the diagram below. That's impossible on an Earth of constant radius. I mean, how's it moving around? It's because you have nonlinear spreading because of polar movement over the Earth moving and shifting its polar orientation. And this will be gone into in this document as well. So with at least 6,000 kilometers post-Paleozoic subduction within the Arctic, not possible. Again, this is an impossible that the Earth has had a constant radius because of that. Additionally, on the plate model, the present Pacific must be smaller than the Permian Pacific by the combined area of the Arctic, the Atlantic, and the Indian Oceans. Obviously, wow, you know, think about it. Yet the continents around the periphery of the Pacific have all moved further apart in the direction of the Pacific margin. Mazurbe has shown the topological impossibility of progression from any Pangea configuration, and that means any, to the present distribution of the continents, except on an expanding Earth. That's the only way you could have a singular crust, but it's not the Pangea as they're putting forth in continental drift. In the case of continental drift, one should find compression, as aforementioned, along one side of a continent and extensions along the opposite side. In the case of expansion of the interior, one should find extension in all oceanic zones. Now, I understand this is very, deep. So you're going to have to do research if you really want to understand this. I would suggest reading Carey's paper. It's available online. I have the links in the document. As Carey in 1970 said in his presidential address to the Australian and New Zealand Association for the Advancement of Science, he stated that the global distribution of the ocean trenches did not correlate with the distribution of oceanic rifts as the plate tectonal model required. Each of the continental polygons had increased substantially in area by accretion of new crust since the Paleozoic. And each continent has increased its distance from each of its neighbors. In other words, all of them. This universal dispersion was greatest from a point near the Scotia Sea and least from East Siberia. As I aforementioned, that is exactly as you would expect, because the locations of the Earth poles during the time of the Mesozoic was different than now, and it moves. Trenches are extensional zones, which are now analogous to the rifts at the heads of landslides, or to bertrands of a glacier, or the semicircular arc of Brabant's Horse, which framed the Gulf of Mexico. That's where the Honduras and Yucatan were departed from. If the continental outlines were fit together on a smaller Earth, they shouldn't precisely fit on the present Earth, and vice versa. And that's exactly what's true. It's this very misfit which is increased in magnitude as the size and the assembly of the Earth is increased, and is further proof of an expanding Earth. A spinning planet increases its mass as angular velocity increases. You can go to this link and it will explain the math of that to you. You can see the link there. Thus, the length of the day increases, and this has been shown in yearly coral growth samples that span over millions of years. It does indeed reflect the change in the length of the day. This is demonstrated in coral growth samples because the size of the Earth is increasing with and due to its increasing mass. And I'll go into why the mass is increasing as well. Coral growth fossil sample and records and cores show that the length of the day at the end of the Paleozoic was 18 hours total. Additionally, the coral growth patterns show that that has been steadily increasing at a constant rate. In other words, the length of the day, the length of the time that the coral has time to grow is increasing at a constant rate and has increased to what we now have, 24 approximately, and a little bit fudge more hour day. However, the length of the year does not change at all, since the orbital velocity of an object is not dependent on its mass, but on its distance from what it's orbiting. The mass of the object it's orbiting. In other words, in our case, our sun. That's explained in the link you can see here below. And there's equations and everything in there to explain it to you. For those that, understand the mathematics. I didn't put it in here because it gets deep. This means that at the end of the Paleozoic, because the days are shorter, but our orbit around the sun takes the same amount of hours. So the year was about 487 days long during the Paleozoic. There still took the same amount of hours to go around the sun, but because the day's shorter, you have more days in a year. It's now known that all the floors of the ocean have been formed since the Paleozoic. So it's assumed equivalent ocean areas have been consumed if you're going to keep the size of the Earth the same. This is Carey's terms. Maxwell's demon is needed at the helm to ensure the clean sweep of the ocean's floor so there's no remnant of old ocean remaining anywhere. Oceans such as the Arctic, the Atlantic, and the Indian date only from the Mesozoic and have doubled their area since the Eocene. The Pacific, too, was a fraction of its present size before the Mesozoic. In Carey's doctoral paper, he states that the expansion is increasing and possibly even exponentially. How he figured this out is to be possible. He hypothesizes that the universal gravitational constant has been changing and decreasing in pulses. That's an erroneous conclusion. It was due to that Carey, not knowing the factors that are causing Earth's expansion, as well as the expansion rate increase. In other words, the rate that the expansion is increasing, it's increasing exponentially. Thus, it was impossible for him to add those to his calculations, and thereby he arose with this erroneous and incorrect conclusion. Doesn't mean the theory isn't correct. It just means what's fueling the expanding of the Earth wasn't known. And so he postulated something that made the whole theory rejected. Carey and the other proponents of Earth expansion could not ascertain a force to explain why the Earth has been able to expand. So they had to conceptualize. They assumed an inner unknown force, again, we're going to say unknown, was at work on the universal gravitational constant change. And that's now been proven that that's not happening. While it has now been shown that neither of these is true, as I just said previously stated by Carey, nor any of the other proponents of the Earth expansion model would have known that at the time. Until the end of the Paleozoic, which is when the expansion of the Earth's size began, mass had been increasing throughout Earth's history, but size had remained relatively constant. In other words, the mass of the Earth is growing, but the size isn't increasing. And I'll get into why that is. It's because the crust hasn't broken apart yet. It had a solid crust all the way around, inside and outside, one piece. As the mass is increasing, the density of the Earth and the pressure changes in the Earth's strata will increase massively. And that creates a spring-loaded stress situation. If you crack that, you're going to have a sudden mass expansion. It's not going to be slow. And you'll see how that happened here as I go on. Carey stated that he had concluded that the gravitational constant decreased pulse caused sudden expansion to start. He believes these pulses are ongoing. It was for this reason the Earth, as I said, expansion theory was just completely discarded. The science community would not and could not believe that to be true without any evidence whatsoever. In actuality, the initial rip of the break in the Earth's crust surface that I've been talking about has been removed from general history teaching. It has been hidden and obscured because it's a massive event, and it goes into the history of the human race and other groups involved here. So I'll go into that. The event that caused the break in the solid crustal structure of Earth's surface, it was catastrophic. So it was called the Great Catastrophe. It tore the crustal shell of the Earth into pieces. It caused what was known as a third mass extinction event. So you can see it below and later on in this Decode. Once the crust was broken, the Earth's spin was now able to cause expansion to begin at a much accelerated rate. Again, it's spring-loaded. As you know, from that time on, it just kept expanding. Even today, the causes of this expansion and the original cause for it to be able to start expanding are hidden, as it would make a drastic change in not just the scientific community's view on Earth's history, but of humanity's understanding of Earth's history as well. The history of its geology, the people of Earth, the species, extinction, all kinds of things. It would cause a complete change in all areas of socio-economic and technology sectors of the entire world. There are two factors that cause Earth global expansion, as well as the ongoing rate expansion. In other words, expansion and the rate of expansion is increasing. Both cause Earth's mass to increase. The first of these two factors is accretion of materials from space. Every day, about an average of 48.5 tons of material fall onto the Earth. You can get that at this website. Plants actually accrete material through what has become commonly known as cold fusion, which is actually low energy nuclear reactions. And I'll be going into that in other decodes. The link below highlighted in yellow because the platform it's on, you can't get the regular links. If you click that, you can go into it, and this will be available on deep dives. So you can click on that. But this was a summit that was hosted by the company ICCF24, which has been working on devices for cold fusion. Mike Adams, known as Health Ranger, also has it on his platform, where he made a phenomenal presentation, a complete expose on impact of cold fusion, or what is known more appropriately as LNER or LENR, or low energy nuclear reactions. This is one of the most important items to watch and understand, because it has the potential to change our lives and the world, because it'll mean a totally different way of getting energy. Because nuclear power plants or coal plants, you're heating water to turn generators. If you can do that without nuclear waste, without all the waste, the pollution, etc., you have literally revolutionized the energy sector, and therefore pretty much every energy is. I mean, everything that's supported by the energy sector, which is all of technology. So if you look at a forest, especially a redwood forest. Contemplate the size of a redwood tree when harvested. It's thousands of tons. If that was entirely created by the tree pulling up soil and rainwater combined with sunlight, energy from the sun and carbon dioxide from the air, there'd have to be a massive crater at the base of every redwood tree, let alone regular trees. However, this is not what we see. We see mounds of fallen debris from the tree, and it gets higher each year, let alone when they harvest these forests and they trim most of the stuff off and then they replant. It's going up massively. Plant cold fusion. And notice, like I said, forests can yield massive timber, but the land keeps getting higher. The growth does not consume the ground material. Instead, it adds to it. So what the plant's actually doing is cold fusion. It's bringing up the material to act like a printer and duplicate it. And then it doesn't need, it just keeps what it brought up and reduplicates it into what it is over and over and over. A person actually won a Nobel Prize where he grew plants in a sealed system, and he'd analyzed the moles of the different elements. And then after the plants were adult, he analyzed, and there was hundreds of % of all of the life-giving materials that we understand as organic life. In other words, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, etc. Additionally, the other factor, like I mentioned, space debris accretion per year is over 7,875 billion tons. So add those two together and you have a massive increase constantly every year of the mass of the earth. It's growing exponentially. The Earth's size is constantly growing, and it causes the Earth's size to increase exponentially. And then that changes the gravitation well of the Earth, and that it causes more of the material to fall to Earth, and that increases an exponential increase. So this, as the Earth spin, once the surface of the Earth was cracked, can now act through the forces of centrifugal force, the torque, will cause the crustal hollow shell to constantly expand after that, and the continents will move apart from each other. As previously mentioned, they'll all move apart. Others aren't moving towards each other because the Earth isn't remaining the same size. So they're constantly moving further and further apart. And one of the most profound statements of the late Professor Sam Carey is, if 50 million people believe in a fallacy, it's still a fallacy. Even if everybody believed it in a lie, it doesn't make it true. Or if even only one person knows the truth and everybody else says that person's a liar, the truth is still the truth. The validity of any theory, as Carey said, does not depend on the number of people believing it. Hence, an accepted theory may be still fundamentally wrong, and regardless of how many people believe that it's correct. Very, very important to understand. So the random continental drift theory, discrepancies and problems, I mentioned a few. Let's go through the details. Subduction problems, as previously mentioned. So what subduction is, it states that the ocean crust that's created at the mid-ocean rifts, as through all of the oceans, you have mid-ocean ridges in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, et cetera, and you'll see it on maps later, is compensated by land that's funneled down deep, unseen ocean trenches to be remelted and used again. And this theory, this is required in order to keep the size of the Earth constant. The first problem with that is subduction zones versus rifting zones. They would have to be equal, but they're not. The mid-ocean ridges are greater in length by 33% than the area of the proposed subduction zones. Again, as also previously stated, Africa and Antarctica are surrounded by spreading ocean floor, yet there's no subduction zones suggested in those areas. Where's the extra crust being subducted to? Just disappearing? It's like, bam, magic. There are no, number 3 is there's no ocean scrape sediments accumulating over time. If subduction zones exist, there must be oceanic scrape by overlaying rock visible at the subduction zones. suggested subduction zones and oceanic floors are free of oceanic slab irregularities. This demonstrates harmonious spreading without subduction. So, for example, if a crust of the floor of the ocean is going underneath the edge of a continent, your fingers over the back of your hand and arm, and you'll pile up skin. In other words, scrape. Subduction number 4 violates physics density laws. It's impossible for a lighter crust to be thrust down into a very much denser mantle. So then the next problem, moon tidal force problems. Earth's current tidal forces cause the moon to drift away from the Earth at a slow, constant rate. Apply that, which applied with over the time the moon has been orbiting, it shows, based on many items that I'll mention here, that moon could not have been orbiting for more than 2.5 billion years. As Schlichter in 1963 noted, current lunar tidal forces could only be 1.4 to 2.3 billion years old. Prior to this time, the moon would have been too close to the Earth to withstand the tidal forces. We know the moon is at least 4 billion years old from samples, which means the tidal forces are far greater today than in the past. Paleontological evidence also confirms the expansion of the lunar orbit was significantly smaller in the past than it is today. This disparity is also due to how long the moon has orbited the Earth, and I'll go into this in a later Decode. Does predate the crustal tearing, but the moon has not been orbiting the Earth since the beginning of the time of the Earth. The moon is actually older than the Earth itself, and it's not been in its current orbit. This, as I said, I'll cover in other decodes because I can't go into everything here. This will last many, many, many days of me talking nonstop. So number 2 of the lunar drift problem is geological evidence in rock strata shows that ocean tides caused by the moon were 60% less 250 million years ago. The next problem is time. The current drift theory only accounts for 4% of Earth's geological history. What happened all the rest of the time? Next, fit problems. Continents must be fragmented, in other words, broken up into pieces to completely fit together to their current positions based on continental drift. Continents are moving in dissimilar speeds, often against the torque and centrifugal forces caused by Earth. India moved 30% of the globe based on the continental drift theory, while America has not moved at all. This is also true of Asia in relation to Africa. It's totally freaking nuts, insane. Number 3 is that there are many gaps and missing land masses when you fit the continents together if the Earth has always been the same size. You look at the Pangea and it's ludicrous the way on a constant size Earth. Next is the dinosaur size problem. Dinosaurs could not have existed in Earth's current gravitational field. Sorry, Jurassic Park people, not going to happen. I'll tell you why of this. The gigantic dinosaur fossils found calculate to body mass that would crush the bones to powder. It also make it impossible for any muscle structure to propel their bodies over solid land. Like they tell you, a Brachiosaurus had to stand up to its neck in water, 85 feet long. It weighed 80 tons. It's going to powder its bones. Next, its neck is 30 feet long. To get blood to their brain, the whole body would have to be full of just one thing, the heart. They said it stood up into swamps up to its neck as one of the ways, so the pressure of the water. You're not understanding something. Animals that walk, that are big on land, have big flat feet. The Brachiosaurus did. Things like elephants, hippopotamus, they mostly walk on land. Rhinoceros, flat feet. What do you get when something's in the water most of the time? You don't get big flat feet. You get web feet. Like a duck. Yeah. Polar bears that swim in the water even have webbing. They swim so much. So there's a lot of problems with the giant dinosaurs. This is a big problem. Look at the size of this puppy here. That's a big critter. Ancient Earth mass with less mass, thereby less gravity, solves all those problems. All dinosaur fossils of all species reveal continuing size reduction from 150 million years ago until their extinction on the surface of the Earth, and I'll go into that as well. They're not really truly completely extinct. About 65 million years ago, because there was another mass extinction at that time. This reveals that there's an ongoing adaptation to the Earth's increasing gravity due to increase in mass. All fossils of plants, animals, all species show the same trend. For example, massive ancient life problem in general. There are many problems regarding the size of ancient life if Earth's gravity has always been the same as it is today. There are many examples, but here's just a few. A pteranodon, extinct 149 million years ago. Look at the wingspan. Pteranodons had a wingspan of up to 30 feet. That's a bit of a problem. And this Argentavis, found in Argentina, in other words, magnificent, about 8 million years ago went extinct. The bird weighed over 240 pounds. It had a 26-foot wingspan. It can't fly in today's gravity and air density. As gravity goes up, the density of the air goes up. Both the pteranodon and this bird could not fly. They would be incapable. Flightless birds are things like ostriches and penguins. They don't have significant wings because they're not using them for flight. Penguins use them in the water. But even more exemplary of the issue that I'm speaking to is this incredible dragon Gymnera. These dragonflies had 25-inch wings, which are gossamer. I mean, look at a dragonfly, it's a gossamer wing. It would shred if it's used in today's air due to the density. Obviously, the air that thing flew in was much less, had a much lower density. Look at the size of the wings. There's a huge problem here. That's one big centipede, the Anthropolera, 8.5 feet long. They can't exist today. The exoskeleton insects, where the skeleton like that is on the outside, are incapable of inhaling air into their body. What they rely on is air to flow down air tubes. The air is too dense to get all the way down that thing. It would suffocate and die. It could never get that big. So expansion tectonics, let's go to this in depth and analyze this. A study of Earth's structure and movements of the Earth's crust due to an increase in Earth radius and mass. That's the definition of expansion tectonics. Originators of Earth expansion continental movement theory. In-depth look at the originators here. Robert Mantovani, as previously said, 1889 and 1909, published a theory, Earth expansion and continental drift. He considered a closed continent covered the entire surface of a smaller Earth. Lindemann is aforementioned in 1927, Christopher Otto Hilgenberg in the 1930s, Professor Sam Warren Karen, and I highly recommend you read his doctoral thesis and dissertation, emeritus professor of geology at University of Tasmania, 1950s to the late 1990s. Chan Kosier, 1980s, and Klaus Vogel, 1980s and 1990s. What they're saying is that the Earth is not remaining at constant size, it's expanding. The radius increase is exponential. It is increasing at an increasing rate, in other words. And this has actually been backed up by NASA. In 1993, they completed an Earth expansion study, and the expansion rate was measured over a 17-year period using space geodetic data recorded at 660 stations distributed globally, including global positioning systems data, very long baseline thermometry, satellite laser ranging stations, and stations for Doppler orbitography and radio positioning integrated by satellite. Calculations from that study showed that the current expansion rate is 18 millimeters plus or minus 0.04 per year. and it's gradually increasing at 0.21 plus or minus 0.02 millimeters per year. The current rate expansion is 22 millimeters per year. Not only is the Earth expanding, as I've previously mentioned, its mass is growing by plant cold fusion and accretion of material, 7.875 billion tons. These two factors have increased the Earth's mass and therefore its gravity by 48% in the last 250 million years. The previous expansion rate was about 100 microns per year. That's about the thickness of a human hair for the first 75% of Earth's history. Again, as you increase the mass, you increase the gravity, you increase the debris, and the size allows for greater plant growth, more accretion on both cases. The increase in expansion rate was due to the ripping part of the Earth's crust, again referred to the mass extinctions area, the third great mass extinction of the Great Catastrophe. Once the continents were ripped apart, they began to move quickly. Remember, they're spring-loaded. As acting forces due to centrifugal force and torque of the Earth's spin will cause expansion at a much greater rate now. It was slowly starting to pull apart, and I'll go into that, but it wasn't complete. And so you just had areas, not the entire thing. So 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was the size of our moon. Its original size was about 22% of its present radius. Current dating techniques for Earth's age rely on dating solid rock, and you cannot date molten magma. So prior to 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was completely molten. So you can't date how old it actually was from rock. It's actually 6.3 billion years, somewhere between that and 4.4 billion years. And that's due to other evidence throughout our solar system. When the first solid rock began to form was about 4.4 billion years ago. The Earth's solid crust was completed 4.0 billion years ago. The modeling shows how Earth, this is a model of how Earth looked when it was pretty much one solid piece 4 billion years ago after all of the Earth's surface had cooled and solidified, which it was 22% of Earth's current size. So removing the oceans based on age gathered by core dating and currently not mandating the size to remain constant yields a fit of 99%, as I had previously said. The remaining missing 1% of the landmass is due to flattening of the continents, part of it, as the Earth expanded, and the land that now lies inside the hollow Earth is the other part. Parts of the continents of Atlantis, Polaria, a major part of Polaria is Greenland, but there's small parts that went inside the Earth, along with a fair amount of Atlantis and other smaller islands moved inside the hollow Earth during the Great Expansion, known as the Great Catastrophe. Antarctica is what is left, major overall parts of Atlantis and Lemuria that are left of Lemuria. A large part of Lemuria was completely destroyed during the Great Catastrophe. The unique fit together of continents demonstrates that expansion tectonics is a precise process, modeling oceanic and continental crust. On a reduced radius Earth not only removes the need to arbitrarily fragment continents to maintain a constant radius, in other words, break them into pieces, it also removes the need to dispose of the excess oceanic crust by subduction. Both of these are done as previously explained in the random continental drift theory. Mountain ranges are caused by the crust flattening as it expands. Watch your own hand as you open and close and the surfaces go from round to flat. On the back of your hand, you'll see little mountains raised. This is also hydraulic mantle current pressures raise mountains. Mountain ranges size is determined by the amount of magma available for flanging. Materially, the massive uplift of mountain ranges is accomplished by infusion of magma from steadily collapsing continental domes. So to explain that, you can see on this diagram, as the Earth was smaller, you see it looks like an eye or a contact lens. So that has That's going to break and flatten out as the Earth gets bigger. It was smaller, that was a crust. Then as it gets bigger, it breaks as it flattens out. And that allows for flanging. Those are the flanges, as well as extrusion of magma through those. And you'll get areas of buildup of mountains from both flanging, uplifting, and magma coming up in the cracks. So general uplift is accomplished by magma under pressure from sagging continental crust. It works like thick hydraulic fluid. The larger a continent, the greater the magma supply for uplift. That's why the highest mountain range on Earth is found on the largest continent, the Himalayas, on the continent of Asia, because it's the largest continent. Mid-ocean ridges are expansion joints on an expanding sphere where cracks open as the floor of the ocean increases and the continents are tilting apart. The ocean floor composition, thickness, and age can be accurately determined with core samples and are distinctly different in all three categories from the continents themselves. The floors of the oceans are volcanic rock, igneous, while the continents are mostly composed not only of igneous rock, but also metamorphic and sedimentary rock. You don't find sedimentary rock almost at all on the floors of the oceans. Additionally, nowhere on any ocean floor is the rock over 200 million years old. In other words, they weren't there. So you can go to this link here. However, on the continents, rock is up to 4.4 billion years old. You can go to that link, and you can also look at this map. I actually contacted the scientists that developed this to get permission to use this. So this shows as you can see, this is the mid-Atlantic ridge, the mid-Pacific ridge, and you can see all of the ridges, and these are the areas where it's expanding. And you can see the age in millions of years down here as you go out. So the newest stuff, where the red is, you can see it starts off, very young and goes up, starts getting 40 million. And then you get the yellow area that goes from about 40 to 60, and it's starting to turn greenish. That goes from 80 to about 140. Then you get some areas along the edge of the continents. And this one big area, which was Lemuria, a big portion of Lemuria, and that all is less than 200 million years, even that area. So that means that area wasn't there. This was here 200 million years ago, but even before that, that was actually wasn't there. That portion of Lemuria formed and was destroyed. The island of Iceland now shows measurable rifting on land, spreading at the rate of 2 centimeters per year. That proves that the Atlantic Ocean ridge spreading rate is increasing because it's now happening on the island of Iceland. Until the end of the Triassic period, the continental crust enveloped the Earth as an unbroken crustal shell, as previously been explained, at 52% of the Earth's radius. At this time, the Earth had no oceans. It had only shallow freshwater seas laying top of the crustal shell. And the term is intercrustal seas. It means laying the surface of the continent, which was all one piece. The Great Lakes in Northern America and Lake Baikal in Siberia are examples of these long freshwater seas. The current salt water of the oceans came from volcanic activity at the mid-ocean ridges. Waters contained in rock at a 7% rate, and additionally, volcanism creates water from hydrogen and oxygen. So the intercrustal freshwater seas, you spin a ball, you'll see this happen. You'll get long S shapes. So the water will go this way to the equator, and then it'll invert and go the opposite way below the equator from any spinning dry object. Water rains down on it. You'll get freshwater seas like this. And those eventually become your rift zones. It all breaks apart. Then you have, once it's completely broken apart, it can start to expand. As freshwater seas slowly expanded the boundaries of the continents that we now have today became recognizable. So you can start to see it starting to open. It wasn't completely open. So as you look at this chart here, or this map, it becomes much, much more obvious. So they show you this common fit here of the Atlantic mostly gone, minus parts of Atlantis. And then here, they don't show you, Austria tucked right up, here's up above North America and Asia, and then Antarctica fits perfectly into the rest of the Pacific Ocean basin. So one of your extinctions actually happened because as these were starting to move slowly at first, you had the Pacific Ocean, and then you eventually had a North Pacific and a South Pacific, and then they merged. So, and you got an extinction event because you're having different salinities, different temperatures merging, and that creates an ice age event. So you can see here on the map of how they fit together. It's really, really evident. Mass extinctions. So what are they? Expansion tectonics explains why you have mass biological extinctions with continental drift. Has no explanation whatsoever. It reveals no reason. Mass extinctions are primarily due to oceans. You don't need meteors slamming into the earth. So you have like mass extinction event, from a meteor. No, sorry. Mass extinctions are due to oceans previously separated, like I was explaining with the Pacific Ocean, being merged by expansion tectonics. It instigates flooding in large areas, drying up in other areas, and global climate changes like ice ages, which initiate further extinctions. The mass extinction periods in which exceptionally large numbers of species go extinct. These extinctions are very different from constant rate extinction that occurs as life continues to change due to pressures. So like the dinosaurs getting smaller and smaller, adjusting to gravity and air density changes and things like that. Pressures also due to mankind. Many species vanished in 5 massive cataclysmic mass extinctions. Today, 99% of all species that have existed on the Earth are now extinct. There have been 5 mass extinction events throughout Earth's history that are listed and commonly accepted. There's actually another one later after these 5 that I'll go into in a separate decode, the Younger Dryas. That's a completely different decode, and that goes into the flood of Noah. So the first big extinction was the Ordovician Silurian extinction, which occurred about 443 million years ago. This was due to simultaneous crustal expansion, increasing Earth gravity generating atmospheric density modification changes that triggered global climate changes, and a drop in sea levels and glacier formation. This caused 25% of marine families and 60% of marine genera to go extinct. The second one was the late Devonian. That was 375 million years ago. This was due to the rifting separation of Australia and the Americas opening up between the North and South Pacific. This is what I was alluding to previously. That caused previously separated oceans to merge. The mass extinction severely affected warm water marine species. 22% of marine families and 57% of marine genera went extinct. 375 million years ago, in the late Devonian period, the environment that had clearly nurtured reefs for at least 13 million years suddenly turned hostile, and the world plunged into the second mass extinction event that's what we're talking about, the same one here. This event was triggered, the sudden expansion again here, by the solar system going through the Photon belt, and that'll be another decode as well. It's what's causing the Great Awakening. 3 passes ago. A pass happens each half cycle of the Earth's, our solar system's rotation around the central sun of the Milky Way, which happens every 125 million years. We're on the edge of another one right now. And so that's global climate change. It's not just the Earth, it's all the planets in our solar system are changing. And they've already seen the solar system ahead of us go through that photon belt that I'll explain later. And what that happens, and all of that will be a separate decode, how it precisely happens, CME and all that stuff. So this happens every half rotation of the sun, because that field, as you'll see in the diagram, goes across the Milky Way. And the Milky Way, being a fallen galaxy, its central sun is inside a black hole. So the rotational cycle is half of the total cycle of one rotation, which is somewhere between 200 and 250 million years. It's actually 250 million. So if you do 250 plus 125, you get 375, thus a mass extinction event. And there's links, 2 links there. And here's the photon belt. So this explains how it works. This sun inside the black hole at the center of the Milky Way emits massive streams of energy. All black holes do, but Andromeda, being a massive galaxy over here, and the globular cluster, Sagittarius, and others create a gravitational pressure. And I'll go into gravity being a push and not a pull. And as I go on here, pushes this field to be pretty much almost 2-dimensional. This is about 3 days of rotation to go through here. So you go through it every half cycle of rotation. The Permian, or the third great extinction, 250 million years ago, again, rotation, initiated by the passing through the photon belt. That was Earth's worst mass extinction. 95% of all species, 53% of marine families, 84% of marine genera, 75% of all land species, plants, insects, vertebrate animals went extinct. This was caused by Antarctica, Lemuria, being pulled, the part of Antarctica that's Lemuria, and the rest of Lemuria that was there at the time, being pulled away from South America and Africa in tandem, thereby merging all the oceans, the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian. The initial complete ripping apart of the Earth's crust, known as the Great Catastrophe, caused the world's first great flood. There's been more than one. The merging of all the world's oceans caused the following 3 ice ages, which caused further mass extinctions. Reefs didn't appear for about 10 million years. This is the greatest hiatus in reef building in all of Earth's history. So the Great Catastrophe, there was a directed energy weapon, otherwise known as a DEW weapon, which is a particle beam, was shot from the moon, and it burned through the crust of the Earth down into the mantle. This was the beginning of the ancient war between Atlantis and Lemuria. Atlanteans destroyed Lemuria's capital. They hit it so long, the capital was known as Thule, with a beam from the moon that was focused on it, that it ripped through the crust, and is now the deepest area in all the world's oceans, known as the Marianas Trench. You can read it there. It's over 28,000 feet deep. Lemuria struck back, and the massive moon craters that you see on this side of the moon are not due to asteroid impacts. They're due to particle weapons. They're retaliatory strikes shot by Lemuria. So to explain this, large asteroids inbound would either fall into Earth's gravity or burn up in Earth's atmosphere. The trajectory for large meteors to impact the moon on the Earth side is not possible. It's either going to burn up in Earth's atmosphere because it goes that far out, or it's going to be falling into Earth's gravity well. It's not, large meteors are not going to strike the side of the moon we see. So the fourth mass extinction, and I'll go into depth in this in a decode on the Lemuria and the Great Catastrophe on another decode. The fourth great extinction was the end of the Triassic period, 205 million years ago. Mass extinction is estimated to have claimed half of all marine invertebrates. Around 80% of all land quadrupeds went extinct. The fifth, accepted, what they call the last great extinction event, was the end of the Cretaceous, as aforementioned 65 million years ago, is famously associated with supposed meteor impact and demise of the dinosaurs. Virtually no large animals survived that. Plants were also greatly affected. Both tropical marine life was decimated. Global temperatures were 6 to 14 degrees warmer than present, with sea levels over 300 meters higher than current levels. At this time, the oceans flooded up to 40% of the continents. This was known, another battle between Lemuria and Atlantis, known as the War of Gilgamesh. This event initiated the Second Great Flood. Oceans rose 900 feet and 80 feet higher than current levels, flooding 40% of the continents, as I just stated. The significant advancements that expansion tectonics does, so it'll become really evident to why this is absolutely the situation. If you remove the oceans based on age gathered by the core dating, as in the map I showed you, and you don't mandate the Earth's size to remain constant, you yield, as I stated earlier, 99% total crustal fit. The missing land mass, 1%, moved inside the hollow Earth, as I previously stated, Atlantis and Polaria and parts of a few other small islands. The Great Catastrophe previously mentioned being the reason for all of that. Antarctica is what is left of the major parts of Lemurian Atlantis, and Greenland is the major part of Polaria. Under all that ice, you're not going to find much left anymore. So a formula for change rate, the expansion tectonics also has a formula. And this formula has not just the expansion rate, but the increasing expansional rate, as previously mentioned, about 22 millimeters per year at this time. So here's a model done by Maxlow, his master's thesis. Global expansion tectonics, he has models from the Archean all the way to the present, and then one going all the way 5 million years in the future based on that expansion rate and the increase in the expansion rate. So let me stop this share for a moment. In a PDF, you don't get to see this. It's really awesome. So this is a model diagram video kind of thing showing the expansion of the Earth. You can see here the Atlantic pulling apart, and you can see the time frame moving up as it does so. So it's really, really exciting. I'll also go straight down to the one for the Pacific, so you can see that as well. So you can see the Pacific, you can see Antarctica and Australia pulling apart and opening up the Pacific Ocean. Quite phenomenal. So I'll go back to my PDF, so it's a little cleaner to read here for you all. Okay, models are animated in 4 dimensions on the expansion Earth. This shows the increase in Earth's radius throughout all its geological history. The random drift doesn't account but for 4% of the time. The expanding Earth model accounts for all of it. From the time the Earth had a solid outer crust, 4.4 billion years. Additionally, all continental motion is directly synchronization with Earth's torque and centrifugal forces resulting from the spin of the Earth. So some of the continents by random continental drift go against that. It's not even possible. So there's the model, the 22% model, and you can see it getting larger as the continents pull apart and the Earth grows in size. Changes in the Earth's wobble. Another advantage to this, the expansion model, is that it accounts for the wobble of the Earth's axis. The Earth wobbles on its axis and the pole moves. So the polar axis rotational movement is accounted for, and it accounts for the asymmetrical spreading of the Earth's oceans. In other words, that chart where you saw that the equator's in different places because the poles move. Earth's poles have moved with polar wobble. And since due to forces due to spin, you have asymmetrical spreading occurring. Additionally, all models accurately locate ancient magnetic poles. That asymmetrical spreading, where you see it spreading at different rates, it locates the pole based on torque precisely where, due to paleogeomagnetic core samples, that's where the pole was. So it fits perfectly. Poles plotted diametrically opposed enable ancient equators and climate zones as well to be established precisely. All models examine geological and geographical and geophysical data as well. All data coincide precisely with expected polar and equatorial climatic and biotic constraints. continental plate assemblage is 100% for Earth geologic history. It covers 100% of the time, as I previously mentioned, from the Archean, the beginning when the Earth had a solid crust, all the way through, with no need to arbitrarily fragment continents, break pieces up, dispose of crust through subduction. None of that baloney is necessary. As previously mentioned, note that Polaria, other parts of the outer crust have gone to the inside of the hollow Earth. It's why the fit is 100% with those parts, but they're only getting 99%. If you take the parts that are inside the hollow Earth, it fits perfect. Models also, another advantage, they include both continental and oceanic geology and show the increase in radius of the Earth, its history, throughout its entire history. So let's look at this. This is really, random continental drift. Okay, so yeah, there's random continental drift. You can assemble Pangea any way you want. Let's make it look like a chicken, but that's what it is. It's a chicken of a theory. It's yeah, I don't buy it. Sorry. Not only that, it's ridiculous. The Pangea theoretical fit. They've actually changed the shape of various continents to make them fit. Australia, what Australia doesn't look like that. What's that? I mean, and you got pieces missing and all kinds of fragments, a lot of stuff missing. That's Pangea. So I wish to thank the following organizations and people for all the information. Encyclopedia Britannica for the Brachiosaurus diagram, Jorge Schneider for the Anthropolera centipede pictures and information, Dr. Brodsky for the diagram of Earth's complete continental fit. And thank you, sir, for allowing me to use your diagrams. Also, Mueller, RD, Estralis, Cigana, and WR Rost to 2008 age spreading rates and spreading symmetry of the world's ocean crust. From geochem, geoscience, you can see all that stuff. I won't read it. I also wish to thank all of the individuals who have been instrumental in advancing an understanding of Earth's history and geology through the growth, Earth, and continental expansion theories. So primarily, I thank and honor Professor Sam Warren Carey and Dr. James Maxlow for their pioneering work in the field of Earth expansion tectonics. Dr. James Maxlow is the source for all of those models that you saw, the Earth expansion models. Please go to the website Expanding Earth for further information on Earth expansion. You can see the links there. Because of his significant contributions to the Expanding Earth model and the information and the truth about the expanding Earth and his brilliance, I'd like to honor Dr. Sam Warren Carey. You can see his picture here. Sam Warren Carey was Foundation Professor of Geology at the University of Tasmania, where he held this chair for 28 years. He was a Doctor of Science of the University of Sydney for his 1938 thesis on the tectonic evolution of New Guinea and Melanesia. He was an honorary doctor of the University of Papua New Guinea, an honorary life fellow of the Geological Society of London, and a former president of the Australian and New Zealand Association for the Advancement of Science. Professor Warren Carey, convener and editor of the 1956 Hobart Symposium on Continental Drift, and was awarded the Gondwanaland Gold Medal and the Clark Medal for his researches on global tectonics. He spent many years on pioneering geological fieldwork in New Guinea, and later was chief government geologist of Tasmania. For 12 years, he was a geological consultant to the Tasmanian Hydroelectric Commission and to several mining companies. He spent a year as visiting professor at Yale and another as visiting professor at the University of Western Ontario. In the Second World War, he served as a special unit paratroop commando. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your brilliance, and thank you for your contributions to the world. Dr. Sam Warren Carey. God bless and Godspeed.